Now we're recording, so we'll call the meeting of the ASD School Board Governance Meeting to order. Today is April 12th at 4:32 p.m. Present in the boardroom are myself for board representatives, and then present online. Katie, can you read the board members one more time?
Andy Holloman and Kelly Lessons.
Okay. Member Donnelly should be joining us shortly, and then we have Superintendent Dr. Bishop and associate cabinet members and staff present with us. We have an agenda in front of us. Any questions, modifications, changes to our agenda before we adopt it? Hearing, seeing none, we'll move forward with the agenda. We have our board monthly time use report up first. Madam President indicated that we would reapproach this after we clarified the data as to what we were monitoring based on the fact that we're doing the actual goal monitor in a meeting per month. And so Katie has that pulled up for members. Are there any questions on the evaluation? My understanding is we're just looking that over, acknowledging. No formal action is required by the committee. I think it's just an information.
President Bellamy is online. I'm just moving her over now and she has her hand up.
Okay. So Madam President, once you're moved over, you're welcome to have the floor if you'd like to comment.
Might take a second.
Madam President, are you able to hear us and take the floor if you have comments about the time use?
I do. I'm sorry. I've been talking all that time. I'm sorry. Katie, can you scroll down to page 2? This is just again, as the chair said, it's just a measure of how we're using our time. If you recall, last summer, our goal was 30% of our time toward goal monitoring. And I am happy to share that in March, 33% of our time went toward the goal monitoring. And so I just wanted to keep this on somewhere in our consciousness, so that as we move forward, we are aware of how we are using our time relative to monitoring student outcomes and all the other stuff that we do. And you'll notice that this month looks a little different than last month. That's all. So thank you for allowing us a space to just review this every month, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Katie, for all the work involved in getting the data measured. We appreciate that. Any other questions from members of the board before we move on? Hearing, seeing none. Item 2 is AR 3311.1A. I believe this is a presentation by the administration. Is that right?
Yep. I'll go ahead. Yes, so what we have here are we're implementing some revisions to AR 3311.1A bids, procurement methods, and contract formation. And this has to do with the definition of public notice for the Anchorage School District solicitations for architecture, engineering, design, and construction solicitations. So currently, the AR reads that we would advertise in a newspaper or publication of general circulation to meet the requirement of public notice of solicitations. We're going to revise that based on our discussions with the deed representative and also due to the rising costs and the lack of efficiency of advertising in publications and newspapers of general circulation. So the new definition of public notice for ASD solicitations will be, advertising on the district's website.
Dave, I'm sorry, is this the incorrect one? There was 2 and I clicked on the first one.
That is correct.
This is the correct one. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm sorry.
And so we will advertise on the district's website. That will be our definition of public notice. So what we've done, and furthermore, we will also, deed has required us to provide some reporting to them to confirm that we're doing so and they're satisfied with our reporting. So what we've done is we've altered this to show that we are advertising, on our website. And then we did also change the days from, it had listed 10 days prior that we advertised. We now have changed that to 21 days to align better with Alaska statute. So that is the change for that AR. I'll pause if there are any questions and then go on to the next AR.
Any questions from the board?
Member Donnelly is joined.
Thank you. Member Dawn has joined us at 4:30 p.m. Any questions for administration?
Member Jacobs, I have a question. I don't know if you can see me.
Nope, sorry, I can't. Thank you, member Lessons.
Oh. Okay, great. I'll just go ahead. Yeah, this is, I appreciate the chance to look at this. I'm wondering how contractors will know. I mean, do they just need to check the district's webpage every day to know when this is going to be missed? Or is there a way they could subscribe to some sort of, this webpage has been updated feed? I don't want to add extra burdens, but I'm curious about how somebody who might want to respond to this opportunity would do so, other than coming to the website.
I can answer that. So what we have, they really do not use the newspaper or publications to find our solicitations. They use our website, and then also their clearinghouses one is called the Plans Room, and the other bid clearinghouse communication organization. So what they do is whenever we post a bid, they post it for contractors. So the contractors either get it off our website or from the Plans Room, and that's really what they do currently. They do not watch the newspaper every day for our bids. And also, furthermore, whenever we post our solicitations, we have what's called a bidders list, where we email it to every contractor that would, if it's a design, we would email it to every consultant that provides design services in the region. And then if it were a construction project, we would email it the notice of solicitation to every construction contractor in the region. So there are systems in place that are fully robust. This will not change anything.
Great.
Any
Thank you so
follow-up,
much.
member Lessons?
Nope.
And then a question I had, because that was kind of my point, was asking if there was an email list. It sounds like there is. Is there a way for new organizations to join that list where it's posted? What does that look like for a new organization?
There's not an email server list per se. We have a bidders list. So if a contractor is new, they typically contact myself or someone in purchasing and say, hey, we're a contractor. We want to bid on your work. Can we be put on your bidders list? So that's typically what happens.
Is that, not being from the industry, is that common knowledge that that's how they would go about it, or is that
Yeah.
something that can or should be?
Really,
posted on our
the
site?
Plans Room is very common knowledge. A contractor knows to go to the Plans Room for all public agency. So they, as I said, there's these clearinghouses, there's multiple systems in place. So if a contractor is not aware, it would be because they didn't want to be aware.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, anything else on this item? We're good now.
All right, so we'll move on to the next AR, which is a revision to AR 3312.1 procurement organization and operational procedures. And this is around providing monthly reporting to the board via board memos of cumulative change orders or amendments that exceed $250,000, meaning cumulative change orders and amendments that exceed. And this is for architecture, engineering, A&E design contracts and construction contracts. Also, it will provide monthly reporting to the board via board memos of cumulative change orders / amendments that exceed 10% of the original contract value for projects which exceed $1 million. Furthermore, it will provide reporting of the cumulative contract costs resulting from those cumulative change orders monthly as well. So that'll be, that is the change on that AR.
That came from the audit.
Yes, and to be clear, this was one of the suggested, the recommendations of the municipal internal audit. And so this was our response to that recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions from the board on this one? No questions on 3312.1. Is that everything we have for this agenda item?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you so much. Moving on to board vacancies. This was an item that continues to be on my radar. I have just a brief update, and then this is something I'm going to propose we continue to keep on the committee's radar after the organization, what that might look like. Member Lessons had a question as to if our 30-day window that's outlined in BB 9223 conflicted with municipal election timeframes. I reached out to a couple different sources. One advised that we should check with district council. The other indicated that they didn't see any overlap. I did look at Juno's bylaws and policies because they utilize the Anchorage clerk's office for their municipal election well, and they use the same stock ASB bylaws. And so to Member Lessons, to your question, to the best of my knowledge, I don't see any need for an update at this point. That's something we can certainly keep an eye on. I do have a running list. I'm continuing to gather methods that various school boards use to replace members on an appointment basis, which I think is how this came on our radar to begin with, and I'll probably hand off to the next chair, whoever that might be. So with that said, is there any further discussion regarding board vacancies, board bylaws 9223?
No, but I appreciate the follow-up.
Absolutely, yep. Seeing no other questions for follow-up, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, board policy 4212.8, employment of relatives. Vice President Hallman, we discussed this last month in kind of, well, at length. And so was curious if you had an update perspective as to what your preference is regarding this proposal.
Overall, I'm satisfied with it as it is, and I'm sure there'll be board discussion on it. It may change.
So Member Hallman, your ask is to move this forward to the full board for discussion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a member of the administration who wants to?
Matt's online.
Okay.
Matt Tiefert is online.
Mr. Tiefert, so I did have a question before you weigh in. Maybe you could answer at the same time you're weighing in. Could you clarify if the current policy applies to only high-level administration, or if it applies throughout the district?
There are a couple components in policy and/or AR. One contained in policy would apply for those employees hired who have immediate family on the school board. And that relates to a requirement in state law in terms of the approval process that's captured in board policy currently. So I don't think there's any adjustment necessary there in terms of what state law requires. And then there's another AR that talks about consensual relationships, which we spoke about at some length, not captured in the employment of relatives policy that's being proposed for amendment here, but nonetheless, a part of the district's approach on that. What I understand,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I might have phrased my question poorly. I apologize for interrupting. So what I think that Vice President Hallman was attempting to address was concerns of members of a household potentially having close relation and organizational chart to other members of their household. Vice President Hallman, please correct me if I'm off base there. It sounds like that our current policy doesn't directly speak to that. Or am I understanding wrong?
And, I'll just say in my case, I'm not attempting to change the policy as it affects anybody, but simply in those two cases where it either requires the permission of the commission or acknowledgement of the commissioner or the superintendent, that those be noted. So I'm not trying to change the policy as it stands.
And Member Jacobs, as I understand, the adjustment to the policy change that is proposed here would be that the recurring requirement that the decision be noted on each subsequent personnel report has been struck. And so that there would be a single period of notice that would appear on the personnel report as approved, considered and approved by the board, consistent with its current approach on a consent agenda type vote. And I think that makes sense to me and is straightforward enough to implement. I would need to work with talent management who manages that report to come up with a way to note that a hire has been made that falls within that category in some way, whether it's a separate section on the personnel report or noted with an asterisk or whatever the case may be. But that's what I understand the adjustment presented today is as compared to what we discussed last time we went through this.
So is the understanding here that the language that's lined out is not going to be included going forward?
That's my understanding, and I don't know if that was the intent, but as I look at the agenda for today's meeting, that was my understanding that what is struck would not be added to the policy.
That's how I remember it.
Yep, that's my understanding as well. Okay, thank you, Mr. Tiford. Are there any other questions or comments for Vice President Hallman or administration?
Mr. Chair.
Madam President, please.
So I still struggle with why we need the policy. I still, so if Member Holloman, if you could try telling me one more time why you think we need to have this in addition to the laws that we already have in place, policies and the law, when it comes to, because employment of relatives, to me, that I don't quite get it. And I'm trying to. I mean, I've been struggling with this since the last time we met. Why would we need to have this policy when we have to do this based on state law? I mean, anybody that is hired, that is a member of the board, if my son gets hired, and that has to be approved through a certain process if I'm on the school board, right? So are we trying to, what problem are we trying to fix with this? Hiring relatives, is it nepotism we're trying to deal with? Sorry for the echo.
Yeah,
Vice President Holman,
that's,
would you like to address President Bellamy?
through the chair, thank you.
Sorry,
Um,
President Bellamy, we're having a bit of spotty connection. I think the question came through.
I think
Vice
it's-
President Holman, would you like to
Matt,
address it?
It's ours. It's ours. Look at our internet connection is through the web.
So
See if I
if
can check.
immediate member of the household that was a relative of a school board member applies and is going to get a job
It
with the
looks like your
district.
volume is off, but we can't hear you. There you go.
Okay, sorry, that might, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It's allowed with the permission of the Commissioner of Education. The question is how many people in the district fall under that classification? As a board member, I think it's reasonable that we know that. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem, but I do think not being aware of it at all really is a problem. And I'm waiting for my own echo to catch up. The issue of relatives of a household being under the supervision of somebody within the district is not covered under state law. And again, we as board members, we have an oversight responsibility. But if you have no idea what the numbers are, we're not providing any oversight.
And can you, now what numbers are you talking about? The number of board members that have relatives working?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to ask us to pause. Does anybody know where the echo is coming from?
I think it's coming from
We don't
the,
hear an echo.
Okay, there's a dramatic, like 3-second delay on everything. So,
We could, yeah. So Vice President Holman, if it's prohibitive for folks online, we could call and at ease while we get IT to take a look, or if folks want to continue, we can do that.
it's fairly distracting.
if we can stop it, that would be wonderful, but if not, I'm prepared to continue. Simply back to President Bellamy's question. I don't know how many, say, children of principals work in their buildings that their parents supervise. I don't know how many board members in ASD have family members that are employed by the district that gained their employment after that person became a board member.
Okay, so that kind of explains. So you're talking about not, you're talking about all newly hired personnel placement. I mean, so if my daughter worked in the district before I became a board member, are you counting? My daughter worked in the district before I became a board member, are you counting that?
That goes through the chair, that goes to statute, and it would not require the permission of the commissioner. If you became a board member and then she applied to the district and was given a position like that, the commissioner would have to give his okay for that hire to take place.
So your thought is in putting the policy forward is that district somehow has a number of people whose parents are administrators working in their building or family members working in their building.
Through the chair, I know it's happened. I have no idea the extent of it.
Mr. Tiefer, do you have any idea? I'm sorry, Mr.
Madam
Chair.
President,
Mr. Tiefer, do you have any idea? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
yeah, no, Madam President, I was asking if you have any further comments.
Yeah, I'm
Mr.
struggling.
Seifert, sounds like Madam President, I want you to weigh in.
I'm struggling. Yeah, I'm struggling with it, but then it's whatever. I'm struggling with it, but then whatever.
So thank you, President Bellamy. Dr. Bishop has asked to weigh in, and then if Mr. Tiefer would like to do so as well.
Sure, so we do have, whether it's a mom and a child or a dad and a child, and also spouses. We don't have them supervise each other, but they do work in the same building. I did have, since I've come though, we've kind of put a halt on that, but I did have, when I offered a principal a position, it was contingent because his wife worked at the building and there weren't very many administrators. So I said, you'll have to move. And NEA Alaska, AEA was very upset with me. So it did cause some hard feelings and upsetness. And my solution then was to rescind the job from the administrator. And then the problem went away. But that then person moved, but it was a hardship on that family because they had young children and the children had daycare by them. So I totally understood it. But, and it's just, it always causes conflict because Alaska is so small. But it's interesting the types of difficulties it comes up, but whether it's perception or not, but it's been a bugaboo.
Vice President, I'm sorry, I wanted to give the floor to Mr. Tiefer first if he wants to weigh in, and we'll go back to Vice President Hall.
Thank you. I think there's a couple things that need to separate it out for me to understand whether this particular adjustment to the policy really changes anything. I think if the intent of the proposed adjustment, which would at this point in my mind include the redaction of the formerly proposed language, wouldn't really much change what the board policy currently requires in terms of when and under what circumstances the commissioner and or board need to approve certain hires. What would change is the notification through the personnel report of that hire having occurred. And to the extent that that's the interest in the change and it's limited to those, I don't see really any problem. But if there's more to it and there's interest in understanding more generally under what circumstances immediate family work together in departments, programs within schools, then I guess this is a bigger issue than what I see captured here in the language of this proposed policy.
Thank you, Mr. Tiefer. Vice President Hallman.
And I'll say that I think most of the time this might have to happen. The administration would have a good reason for doing it. The fact it's noted doesn't necessarily mean there's any wrongdoing by anybody, but it does mean that everybody's aware. It's not something that some people know and other people don't. That's the effort in having the notation.
Thank you, Vice President Hallman. Any other board members wish to weigh in? Not seeing any hands raised. Member Donnelly, as a member of the committee, Vice President Hallman's asked that we move this forward for consideration by the full board. Do you have any preference at this time?
Yeah, I support moving it forward.
Second.
Okay. And then that will be the will of the committee. Second. Perfect. All right. We decided to move this forward to the full board for placement on a future agenda. Anything else on this item before we move on? Hearing, seeing none. Next up is agenda item number 5, BP 9271 Code of Conduct. For those who may remember, we had a spirited discussion regarding adding additional language for community council meetings. That was my proposal. Katie, do you have the ability to pull that up and to share that from last?
The original, or I had thought you were bringing something that was modified.
Nope, and so I actually, I'm proposing one change, and so if you want to bring up, I actually just emailed it to you, so it should be at the top of your email.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah. So while Katie's bringing that up, I can refresh the committee's memory that, and I'll just reread the language, I guess, and then we'll go from there. To be brief, I am proposing, after hearing some of the concerns voiced about conflicting ASD events and appointments, there was a 75% threshold. I'm proposing that we change that to 50% and then avoid modifying the language further to keep the language as clean and straightforward as possible. Oh great, we've got it in front of us now, so I'll let folks read that, digest that, and please know that we're replacing the 75% with 50%. My proposal is at this point. And Katie, if you have the availability to change that on the screen from 75% to 50%, just to.
Right here to 50?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Oh, shoot, I need to drag it out of my email. Hold on.
Oh, you actually just did it. Changed.
It did change?
It did, yeah.
Oh, darn. Okay. Just delayed.
So while folks are digesting, I'll continue to just make the case for why I think this is a good policy move. Right now, there isn't a requirement that a board member attend any community council meetings. It's just encouraged. I think that as someone who's attended, to the best of my knowledge, every meeting that's been assigned to me this past year, and having that experience under my belt, I think it's invaluable. I've heard both that my attendance at our meetings is appreciated, and also that it hasn't always been the case, and that there's a desire for board presence to relay current events, as that's how a significant portion of our public gets the information. I've also heard the interest from multiple councils to write a resolution in support of this change, the original change, actually. But with that said, I do recognize that, as Member Donnelly pointed out last month, that ASD has a number of events that could be conflicting, and so I think that this change represents a nod in that direction, and it's more than fair, in that the limitations are only for those who would serve as an officer or committee chair. And so my ask is to have us move this forward to the full board for consideration. Is there any board member who wishes to weigh in?
Oops. Mr. Chair.
President Bellamy.
Yes, President Bellamy, please.
Thank you. I think, so personally, I like the 75%. I think we hold ourselves highly accountable for, if you decide that this is an important function of the board, I think 75%, 50% to me is too low. I think that I would like to see the 75% as a level of accountability. I think we need to hold ourselves more accountable, not less. And I appreciate the opportunity to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Any other board members wishing to comment? Member Donnelly, I know you had concerns about the original language. Would you, I'm giving you an opportunity to speak before we kind of go through the committee to, informally straw poll vote to move this forward or not? Is there anything you'd like to add?
I think this goes a long way toward alleviating my concerns. We have to remember that the municipal. I have the same problem Member Holloman had with the echo.
We're trying to fix it, Member Donnelly, but we don't know what that fix looks like right now. Sorry.
Sure. I think board members who have kids, board members who have jobs, we don't want to discourage people like that being members of this. And the municipal charter clearly anticipates that. has to be balanced against people having employment and having a life and a family.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Appreciate that. What I just want to clarify, and something I spoke to last month, is that this, even if we change the 75, it's now 50 to 100%, nothing in this amendment to 9271 would change the qualifications or who could serve on the board. This would purely be a requirement to serve as an officer, or what I would propose, have a higher level of accountability and board involvement, or as a committee chair, which would be the same. So that isn't the intent, or that isn't what it is done in actuality with this change. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. But I appreciate your comments. Anything else before we conduct our informal straw poll to move this amendment on? Okay, hearing, seeing none. Vice President Holloman, would you support moving this revision on to the full board for consideration?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Your thoughts?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. We'll move that forward and ask Madam President to consider placing that on a future agenda item. Anything else on this before we move on? Hearing, seeing none. Community Finance Advisory Committee. This is a item, and Katie, are you able to pull this up? Yep. Perfect. For those online, this is a item Member Higgins and I had authored some time ago, actually, and worked together on. We are now bringing it forward for consideration and kind of at least an initial discussion, as this will could potentially be my last meeting chairing the governance committee. So I wanted to get initial feedback, thoughts, and questions from the board on this topic. Member Higgins isn't here, so I'll speak to it as best as I can. The intent of the Financial Advisory Committee is to facilitate a citizen-led advisory only look at district finances, with the goal of producing a product that would be helpful to the board administration in crafting its budget and providing additional perspective that might not be captured at present. A version of such committee previously existed within the district and was dissolved for reasons that I'm not familiar with intimately. I think there are a number of reasons why additional public engagement will be beneficial, especially given recent events, but I'm interested to hear board perspective and feedback on the proposal as written. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. It's something we can discuss at future committee meetings if the chair at that time so chooses as well.
I have, Mr. Chair.
With that, I guess I'll open it up first for board members for discussion. Oh, yeah, Madam President, I apologize, I didn't see your hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So years ago, we had a advisory committee. And I'm interested to, I guess I'm interested to hear. Administration's thoughts on how would this work exactly? I heard you say that it would be advisory. But I'm trying to figure out, what would this do that we're not able to do? What would this do that we're not able to do?
So real quick, broad brush, I've been going to the municipalities budget advisory committees now for a little over 5.5 years. In that time, I've never seen them actually be able to pull together cogent, cohesive recommendations that assisted the mayor in changing the structural organization of the municipality. or significant budgetary changes. What I have seen is certain areas of interest where they were able to raise and get briefings. And then they would generally sign a resolution that would either support our bond or not support our bond, and a resolution to support our budget or not support our budget. But even within the municipalities, I think it's a reach to think that 9 disparate people for 1 hour a month are going to be able to provide a thoughtful, deep, deliberate analysis with recommended changes to a budget as big as ours, frankly. I think the intent is good, but when you look at 3 members being appointed by the school board, members appointed by assembly, the labor organization representative, which goes against no financial dealings with the district to ensure that there's no conflict of interest. I think it would be a reach, frankly, to get 9 people to agree who aren't subject matter experts in education. I mean, for instance, if you want to go look at federal programs and start looking at all the different grants and the people that manage them, you would have to know what grant managers are, what they do, the reporting criteria and requirements. And these are technical skill sets not found in very many places around the community. I just don't see how, with this committee forming on 1 July, knowing that we would have to have their recommendations to the board 6 months later in December, that it would meet what you wrote, which is a technical committee to conduct an organized review, to prepare and present recommendations to the board on opportunities to maximize resources to the district. I frankly, and I don't mean this in any rude way, I don't think that that intent could be met with 9 disparate people in 6 months at 1 hour a month. And then we go further. When I look at this, I think all of us are tracking that the fiscal cliff in FY24 is going to be whatever number it's going to be. About 4 weeks from now, the legislators I'm talking to are thinking that the session's going to end around May 18th, so they can switch focus to raising funds and trying to get reelected and doing normal campaign things. So around the 18th, we'll see what has been passed. We'll be able to relook what we think the projected fiscal cliff is going to be for FY24. And we're going to have to start a very deliberate, thoughtful, methodical review of everything from school closures to programs to all of the things we have talked about in the past, but never been able to actually address because they were unpopular. I think 3 of our board members, member Bellamy, Donley, and Holloman, have been at board meetings where we talked about closing a school at the easiest place in the district, which was on post, and the amount of pain and anguish over several months over one school. And I don't think we're looking at one school in FY24 if numbers don't come back strong.
And in addition to reduction of staff,
And it,
smarter use of staff or staffing personnel to put in classrooms. I mean, we've recommended that in ways where, so I mean, and those came from public recommendations off of our surveys.
so if you're to look at a full-blown structural reorganization to accomplish what might be required, these 9 people are going to be able to help provide the board what they need. I probably should shut up. That's my thoughts though.
Thank you, Mr. Appreciate it. The underlying goal was to provide additional feedback that might not currently be captured specifically by utilizing public involvement. Is there room for us to do that using the process that you described going forward, where we're taking a top-down look?
Well, I think most of the board is pretty aware that when we start talking about potential reductions, whether they're programs or schools or whatever, the more you bring the public in, the more that information will go out in an untimely manner. We may bring up a whole handful of schools to start looking at, and now it gets leaked out. And knowing that many of those on that list are never going to be on the list that we actually present to the board. I think doing town halls and things like that is a good way to get public input.
We had done this just to engender more public outreach at one time, where our surveys went to groups of people. So we literally sent them to stakeholders in Anchorage, whether they were nonprofits, they were for-profits, they were the chambers, they were the chamber businesses, parents, school communities, teacher groups. Like, we went and sent, and we just said, come up with, like, what would it look like for you to save money? Like, what, think outside the box. So it wasn't the regular survey with answers. It was like really open, meet together, like a group, and they would say, we're a group and these are some of the ideas. And it was, it was everything under the sun. It was every group pointing at the other group, like, you should get rid of special education because it costs too much money, but they didn't know the law around it. You should get rid of high school, blah, 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 because we don't. Get rid of your immersion schools. Actually, okay, you should get rid of that. So, it was interesting because we really did have a lot of feedback, but without the experience and the understanding of law and structure and the goals and how, it is difficult. So I don't think we've been void of like this public access and information. It is hard to get. We, put on social media, we did this, that, when we did have public events, those were the least supported. Like, we had them around the district and kids would come, which was really fun because they got extra credit and it was fun talking to them. But when they were here, politicians, people who were going to run, were the biggest people who showed up, to be in. Unless, of course, you had something on the docket that might be removed, then you filled the house. And so I think the expertise, I don't think the input was lacking. I think the expertise and knowledge of operational structures was lacking in people. Great ideas, they were fun ideas. I wish I could have done some of them. Half of them, or not half, that's an exaggeration, but quite a few of them were against the law. So, it was just interesting. It was, you had everything from get rid of the school board, get rid of the superintendent, get rid of special education, it costs too much.
Student nutrition, because parents should feed their
Don't feed
kids.
kids, you'll save money. It was, they were interesting. But even school groups had some things, and we utilized some of those, to make some arrangements. That's where the health teachers came from. Schools told us you could better utilize these people in schools and reduce cost. And so we like, wow, that's a great thing. Brought it forward and didn't go anywhere. It was our recommendation to the board, but so I see the purpose, but I think we're trying to find the next best thing to make a thing, because we see that funding for schools is a problem. You can put in lots and lots of stuff, and we want lots of information, but it's hard. What gets put to you is hours and hours and hours. And this is I think that the board could, the budget's public. What you're asking for is, okay, now help me make my decision public. Isn't that part of our public process? Or that's what I see it. This is informing the board, right? This isn't informing.
It's not for us.
Our surveys also inform the administration. And what we would do is, here's what your people said. This is how we're meeting what your goals are and the input. That's kind of what we do. But it was fun that one time. I just want to let you know, it was fun reading all those and having great ideas. And we actually used some of them, but we struggled because whoever was on the other end of having a redesign, it was hard. It was just hard to take something away from people that they're used to having.
When all of us saw what happened prior to Dr. Bishop getting here, and it was the Browder and Ed Graff years where the school board had all the departments go up for 2 days and talk to the school board, and what came out of it was 5% cuts across the board. And I've done large reductions in force in the military, but still, and they messed up by doing 5% across the board. When you start doing reductions, you have to identify every position that's going to go away. What are the key tasks that individual does? Can it be cross-leveled or not? And the more you make, the more you give up on cross-leveling, and you have to accept. And these are the things that we're no longer going to do. Well, what they did instead was a lot of budget amendments in February. A lot of individuals who knew they just lost their jobs, so they found another one and left. And a few years later, as we started digging into the district headquarters, we found these huge gaps of things that had not been done for several years, and no one knew that they hadn't been done because the person who did it left in a hurry because they needed employment. And because they looked at it as, we need to cut admin and let's do 5%. How many millions can we get for 5% or 10%? What happened really, it hurt the district for several years. And that's why this is complicated. If we're going to look at restructuring administration and structural programs within the district, it's that level of detail that takes fidelity and honestly, the courage to tell the board, these are the things that won't be done. These are the areas we would accept risk in federal programs, grants, and funding. And if you can't talk those levels of detail, when you talk about rechanging a structure, then this group, even if it was 2 hours a month, in 12 hours, they're not going to be able to do that between July and December. It's going to take 1,000 plus, I don't call them man hours, person hours, labor hours, hundreds and hundreds of labor hours of lots of different people who know what's happening to do this right. You can't pull 9 people off the street and get that. You just can't.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop, and Mr. Anderson. Appreciate the feedback and perspective. I'll just speak to a couple points regarding intent, and I guess, and maybe clarification. I know Member Higgins and I both spoke to identifying if this is realistic. That's a separate question, but we both spoke to identifying individuals who did bring experience and expertise to the table. Now, whether or not you could identify or recruit such individuals is a fair question, and one that we hope to discuss during the review process for this proposal. But it is a fair point, and something we considered for sure. The other thing that I think that Member Higgins and I both identified was years ago when the state fiscal, most recent fiscal troubles were just starting. I think the current governor, Walker at the time, put out publicly available Excel spreadsheet with ways to close the state budget gap and encourage public involvement, awareness. And it was years ago. It seems like a lifetime of discussion ago, but it did begin to have that conversation as to how one will better understands the root of the problem, and then 2 ways to identify solutions. And so I think there was value in that process, although it took quite some time, and the discussion they're still having to this day. But it's a much more informed discussion now than it was years ago when we started having it. So I'll leave it there. Dr. Bishop.
Yeah,
please.
I would say I love that process too, because it enlightened everyone about the difficulties. And that's what we're saying. That's what people would need. But it wasn't 9 people. I participated in that. I was able to go to all those community meetings and play with that little thing. And what that did was educate people, to your point, that it's not such an easy task. That's what we're telling you. I think we're on the same page there, saying it isn't as easy as 9 people solve a problem. enlightening people that we do have a bigger issue. If you care about Alaskan education, we should actually, but here are the levers. I mean, if, I like the idea if we built some kind of a little thing, but it wouldn't let you, you can't do this. You can't eliminate health and human services totally to make something else go, because you would pull levers. I mean, to your point, that was a great tool. And I think, because it was to solve the PFD thing and the whole, you know, but, I mean, that was a fun tool to have, and it educated people. And if that's very different to me than this. This is like, have 9 people inform us of how to do the business, rather than having everyone share in the knowledge of the difficulty and have open communication, because that is a good thing.
Thank you again, Dr. Bishop and Mr. Anderson, for the perspective. Any board members have comments? Feedback, perspective, thoughts? Vice President Hallman, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I'm going to say I think the comments by Mr. Anderson are pretty well thought out. I do understand the general idea, and that is to get fresh ideas, fresh perspectives from members that may not want to actually run for the school board in order to give their opinions. I'm trying to think if there was a way to bring in groups of people for focused analysis at different times, maybe not right as part of the budget process. I think we keep the CFO and other folks really busy during that time anyway, but there may be value in asking the public to look at specific functions for a bit and then weigh in. But it's not something I would feel comfortable trying to come up with a solution for off the cuff in a committee meeting. But I can see where getting 9 people, putting our whole budget in front of them, in essence, we're asking them to serve as a second board. They're going to need staff time. They're going to need resources in order to gather that information. I don't see how it works to do what I think your obvious intent is. I would want to think about this quite a bit more before we move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Hallman. Katie?
You have President Bellamy and Member Lessons.
Okay, President Bellamy and then Member Lessons, please.
Sure, thank you. Ditto to Andy's comments regarding the intent versus the impact of this. I think the intent is to continue to be transparent in all phases of our work, continue to communicate with the public, continue to engage people in a process. I think this process is a little bit overreaching for me. I think it is going to require more time, more staff time, more district resource. And I have I don't care however many people you have, but having 9 people, I'm not sure how we came up with the people who are going to be on the committee. I get 3 by the superintendent, 3 by the board. Why do we need a union person? I guess I would like to see just 3 parents there if we were gonna have any kind of discussion. I mean, they are the ones that access education for their kids. And my final thought is for us to take our time with this and not, not rush it through, but to think it through and listen to the comments from the administration. I know it's hard because we tend to want to do what we think is right, and I absolutely get that. But I think the impact of this is going to be significant. And with the new superintendent coming in, perhaps we could wait and get that person's view as well as what we've already gotten from the staff. So yeah, I just see this as, I recall the days of the budget review committee, and I recall and I know it doesn't have to be that way, but it was. It did not do what the intent of this is trying to do. And I guess I would need more time to try to make it, to try to make some changes to it, to do what I think we want to do. I think we can do this a different way, but I don't want to get into all that now. But our finance committee can have more discretion in how we make our budget available to the public. The number and kinds of opportunities we give to the public to see the budget that is developed by the people that know education. An education budget is not like a BP budget. It's just not. And so we just need to proceed cautiously. So thank you.
Lessons.
Thank you for the conversation. And thank you also to Katie for improving the echo. It's so much better. I really appreciate that. Yeah. I'm struck sitting here because I'm thinking that as a board with the superintendent search process, we have really found some new ways to incorporate public feedback into shaping the actions that the actions that we've taken. So I'd be curious and intrigued and interested in finding new ways to expand that public input process, maybe through the existing finance committee, through focus groups. But I really do appreciate Mr. Anderson's comments and reflections on that it might be a reach to have 9 heads pointed in the same direction in a meaningful way with an hour a month or so of time. So I hear that, but I do want to think proactively about how we can improve community feedback. And I think there are ways. I think this is a good start, but I'd be open to new ways as well.
Okay, it is now 5:34. So just a quick check for the committee. We haven't resolved all of our business. Vice President Hallman, Member Donnelly, would you like to table this for future governance committee meetings, schedule another meeting, or continue for a few more minutes today?
I don't have a problem moving it forward. I really think it might be useful, especially if you could narrow down chunks of the budget for a group like this to look at. And of course, it would completely depend on who was willing to serve on it too. If you got lucky and got a Mark Foster or somebody with that kind of experience that was really willing to put some time into it, it could be very useful, giving us some alternatives. But I completely acknowledge Mr. Anderson's observations about the municipal budget committee and the, and that it may not work or be helpful. Yeah.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. So I appreciate that. I think the intention, at least my preference, is hearing from the administration is to take this back to review, improve, and update. With that said, my question to you as a committee member was, we still have agenda items outstanding for discussion. Would you prefer we address those today by continuing our meeting a few more minutes, schedule a separate meeting, or move them forward to the next regularly scheduled governance meeting, whenever that is?
I can go a while longer.
I can go a while longer as well.
Okay. The remaining items we have may not require significant staff involvement. So if there's staff who'd like to sign online or leave, understood. With that said, any further discussion on the CFAC? Seeing none, we'll move on to the proposed ASD resolution regarding the NSBA letter of DOJ policy. Member Donnelly?
Yeah, after our discussion at the last meeting, I significantly edited this and reduced it to about half of the original proposal. Pretty much, it's much more straightforward now. And if the members have looked at it, you can see that it's a lot shorter. And I keep trying to do the slider bar.
You just tell me how you want me to scroll it, Dave, since it's your You're speaking to it.
I think it's very matter of the fact now. It's more to the point and very matter of fact. And all it does is, well, you can read the resolves. They speak for themselves.
Comments on the amended proposed resolution by member Donnelly. Questions or comments from the board or president? President Bellamy.
Yeah, I would just like to ask member Donnelly, why do we need this now? The issue happened in October. I'm just not sure why we are holding on to this resolution when, by all intents and purposes, the matter has been acknowledged as a mistake. It has been not just, I mean, I just think it's resolved, and I don't know why we keep fanning this particular flame.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair.
Member Donnelly, if you'd like to respond.
Because the Anchorage public has never heard us take a position on this issue. That's why. And we should have taken a position on this issue, in my opinion. And I think late is better than never. And I had kind of hoped that maybe there had been some action by the Association of School Boards. I mean, the Alaska Association, but they chose not to act, and that's okay. That's what I anticipated, that organization wouldn't act, but I still think it's appropriate for us as a Anchorage school district to take a position on what happened. And there are members of the public that to this day still contact me, at least, if not other members, saying, why haven't we?
So the AASB did issue a response, a written response from the organization. And that was probably back in, I don't know if it was December or January. So anyway, my own, I think I just feel like this just keeps, I don't know, it keeps regurgitating that which has happened. And, you know, we are a member of the AASB, who is a member of the National School Board Association. And to resolve our partnership with them or our membership with them down to this, a resolution that basically, I don't even know what it does, other than affirm to some people that the association made a mistake. We already know that. I just think at some point we need to just move on and tell people that there has been an apology. There has been efforts have been taken to correct and to get people to not hold on to that which was an obvious mistake. So I just don't see why this is necessary.
Well, I respect your opinion, Madam President. I just differ.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Member Donnelly, I don't see another hand raised, so I'm going to ask a question. Member Donnelly, I'm curious if you would support a more narrow, and I realize you've reduced, I think originally we had 3 to 4 pages, and then now we're at one front and back. I'm wondering if you would support a more narrow and simplified view that focused on the NSBA and left out some of the references to the federal government, and really kept it within scope of what our day-to-day course of business is as a school board. So something like under be it resolved, keeping number 1 that references
Can
you
you
know, that
scroll
we
up?
would condemn threats of violence And then number 3, the actions of the NSBA regarding their letter. And then leaving the rest out that pertain to the federal government, the White House, and then maybe including in the resolve that just a note of appreciation that the NSBA apologized. I believe it looks like it's September 29th, and I believe there was one additional letter. And focusing on the NSBA, as that seems to be the underlying intent. I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
Well, Mr. Member Jacobs, that would be better than the board not taking any position at all. But I have to say that the role of the White House was incredibly inappropriate, and they concealed their efforts in this because they were inappropriate. White House initiative reached out to the School Board Association and asked them to send a letter which they could bootstrap into something for the Justice Department to act on. And that's the facts. And they concealed that initially, and then it wasn't until later on that that was actually revealed. So there was clearly inappropriate action by the White House in interfering with both the School Board Association and the Department of Justice in this matter. But if the suggestion as you're making is better than nothing at this point to me.
And Member Donnelly, just to clarify, yeah, I'm not, my attempt isn't to argue or debate the facts as you relayed them. I just don't think, I think putting that aside and focusing on the NSBA that's the underlying concern I see, but that's also where there's a tie to the board as we're a member of the ASD, which is a member of the NSBA. Seems to be the most direct path to taking action that's relevant to what we're doing. So I appreciate you answering my question. I guess hearing that, my thought is to maybe review what we have at this point, make some changes and sending a draft for you to review at the time you so choose, and then we can send that back to the governance committee that's in place going forward for review and action. That's what I would propose at this point, but I want to open the floor one more time for questions, comments, or thoughts. Hearing none. Vice President Hallman, do you have an inclination as to how to proceed with this item?
I generally side with the issue. This wasn't an issue in Anchorage. Not that that excuses anyone for anything in particular. I think there was, unfortunately, a threat to public officials. Not much of a threat to Anchorage school board members, a little bit of a threat to Anchorage Assembly members. And I think that's the environment that this all happened within. To my knowledge, no one got oppressed, which doesn't mean everybody's excused. But at this point, in this stage, I don't see the value in moving it forward.
Okay. Member Lessons, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just briefly, sorry, I had to step away, but then I heard Member Holloman speaking. I guess I'd like to put it on the record that I had cause to reach out to
We both did, Kelly.
yeah, we had multiple, Member Bellamy and I both reached out to federal law enforcement regarding something that was out of the realm of the ordinary. And so I'm not quite sure how to word this. Tensions were very high in the fall. Individuals in Anchorage took action outside of board meetings in ways that were
Frightening.
Yes. So it seems relevant to put that out there.
So the status of this discussion, at least right now, is there isn't 2 votes from the committee to move it forward. So we would put this back in the list of items to amend, reconsider in a future governance meeting is what I would propose. Is there anyone else who wishes to discuss this prior to moving on? Hearing, seeing none. Again, time check, it's 5:47. We have 1 item left, which is policy review. There are 6 policies listed. Would the committee prefer to continue working through or address this at a future meeting later this month, or work it through it at a future meeting when the governance committee reorganizes?
Is there any, are any of them pressing for right now?
These were our regularly, the rolling 3-year review. When I've had urgent or pressing changes, I've brought them forward outside of this process. So I have nothing, but I'm not sure if Member Donnelly or Vice President Hallman had anything.
I didn't find anything I wanted to bring up.
Member Donnelly?
I didn't find anything either, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we can say that we've reviewed those and have no changes. With that said, we'll mark that item off of our agenda as complete. Any new business before the committee? Hearing, seeing none. We do not have a set date at this point due to reorganization, which occurs later this month. It's been a pleasure serving with the committee and all the board members who attended all of our meetings. It's felt like quasi full board meeting. So thank you for the excellent attendance throughout the year. With that said, we take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Hearing no objection, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.